Pakistan and Iran trading precision strikes. Another US attack on the Houthis in Yemen. Yet more devastation in Gaza. The Middle East appears to be on the edge. Should we be concerned about a wider war?
We're seeing this dynamic sort of replicate all across the region in a very, very dangerous way, and in a way that we haven't seen in a very long time.
Iran says its recent military activity is a response to a series of attacks on their territory, most notably this one, a deadly bombing on January the 3rd, which killed nearly 100 people. Tehran's retribution has seen its elite revolutionary guards strike what they say are terrorist sites in Iraq, Syria, and on Tuesday, Pakistan, where they hit an area in Balochistan, killing 2 children. Today, Pakistan responded, claiming that they'd targeted separatist militants inside Iran. Tehran condemned the attack, saying 9 people had been killed, including 4 children. Despite a sense of new tension, both nations have emphasized communication and dialogue.
Iran is a brotherly country, and the people of Pakistan have great respect and affection for the people of Iran. We have always emphasized dialogue and cooperation.
But how is this connected to wider tensions in the region and the war in Gaza? Iran's strikes on Pakistan and Syria appear to be a direct retaliation to attacks on their soil. But the attack on the Iraqi city of Erbil, they claim, was targeted at an Israeli spy base. And as we know, Iranian proxies, the Houthis in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon, have been responding to events in Gaza, as Israel fights Hamas, who are also backed by Iran.
What we have seen take place over the last several months is the crux, the final conclusion, the proof of the pudding of why Iran has been building this network of regional proxies for the last 20 plus years, is to be able to exploit the very kind of scenario that we saw triggered by October the 7th, which is to take advantage of the vulnerabilities, take advantage of various vacuums across the region, and in Iran's eyes, to show that the US and its partners are paper tigers.
Footage today from the Israeli Defense Forces shows them attacking the area around the biggest hospital in southern Gaza. Israel states its mission is to destroy Hamas, but it's also been exchanging fire in the north with Hezbollah in Lebanon. With fiery rhetoric abound, there is also concern that Israel could escalate, leading to a direct confrontation with Iran.
There is an empire of evil emanating from Tehran, spending billions of dollars in arms and money and people's well-being to derail the entire stability of the world and the region. And that is exactly what we are seeing, and they have to be faced by a very strong coalition.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was also in Davos this week. He spent the past few months trying to simmer down tensions in the Middle East. As he tried to leave yesterday, his plane was grounded due to a mechanical failure, stuck on the tarmac as tensions were boiling. Some critics say the US should be pushing for a ceasefire in Gaza to calm the storm. But is it too late?
Has that wider regional escalation developed a life of its own, whereby, yes, of course, a ceasefire in Gaza is diplomatically vital, frankly, to de-escalate in the state-to-state dynamic. But have these proxies, and particularly the Houthis, found their own dynamic here? They are now showing that, frankly, even with American airstrikes, they are not deterred. And I think that's the bigger concern.
Further worries on top of yet more and more death in Gaza. Nearly 25,000 Palestinians have now been killed since the war began. A people caught in the middle of a geopolitical jigsaw, bearing immeasurable suffering.
Kieran Woodley there. Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to Dr. H.A. Hellier, a Senior Associate Fellow in International Security Studies at the Royal United Services Institute for Defence and Security Studies, who is in Jordan. I asked him how concerned he is by this exchange of missile strikes between Pakistan and Iran.
Seeing any degree of escalation, I think, is concerning because it empowers actors within the region to think that they might be able to escalate in other ways as well, and Iran in particular. I do think that there's less risk of this spilling over too much, simply because of the nature of the strikes between between the Pakistanis and the Iranians. But we frankly don't need any more room for the possibility of escalation. You know, the law of unintended consequences when it comes to armed conflicts is very concerning indeed.
This is the first external land attack on Iran since Saddam Hussein and Iraq back in the 1980s. So it's not normal, is it, this sort of thing?
Well, none of this is normal, Kieran, right? So, I mean, I think that we have to be very, very cautious about, normalizing this sort of violence, because then that means that the next time that things do escalate, we won't take it as seriously as we ought to.
Do you draw any line at all between what's happening between Pakistan and Iran and the conflict in Gaza? Is it giving cover even to Iran in some way?
I don't want to jump to conclusions in that regard. There is a temptation, as I said, to see this as evidence that Iran is flexing because it feels like it can. But personally, I'd be cautious about that. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'd just be cautious about being certain about that at this point.
And finally, what are the risks of further escalation? Is this just a tit for tat, or could it grow?
When it comes to the Iranians and the Pakistanis, I'm hopeful that we're not going to see much more emanate from this particular, as you put it, tit for tat. But again, none of these things happen in a vacuum. Okay, so what we've seen unfold in Gaza, what we've seen unfold with the Houthis in Yemen, what we're seeing the beginnings of when it comes, I hope I'm wrong, but the beginnings of escalation between the Israelis and Hezbollah. I don't think 4 months ago people would have dreamt that we would be in this particular position. People were talking about normalization between the Saudis and the Israelis and, all this sort of jazz. The world's changed quite a bit in a very short period of time. So none of these things are happening in a vacuum. So at the moment, I don't think that there's a great likelihood of, for instance, all-out war between Iran and Pakistan. But that's not saying much. We can't set the bar that low because when we do, it means that, as I said, law of unintended consequences. The crisis can spill out elsewhere, and then suddenly we find ourselves in a very dangerous confrontation that is very regionalized and pulls in other external actors, be it the West or otherwise, into the region in very dangerous ways indeed.
Dr. Hellier, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thank you, Kieran.